Texas Math Mundo audience, are we in store for a treat on today's show? In the house, Dr. James Alvarez, a professor at University of Texas, Arlington. He shares his educational journey, his insight, especially in regards to underrepresented minorities in STEM fields. What a beautiful example, and I'm so appreciative that Dr. James Alvarez of the University of Texas at Arlington is here to share his wonderful perspective. Let me take a quick moment and ask that if you enjoy this content, that you please hit the subscription button and the notification bell, that you leave a comment below, and that you smash that like button. I have plenty of wonderful things in store for this channel, and I truly appreciate your support. Dr. James Alvarez, University of Texas at Arlington, right ahead. My name is Saul Cantu, and this is Texas Math Mundo. For a treat today. In the house, we have Dr. James Alvarez. Dr. Alvarez is a mathematics professor at the University of Texas at Arlington. This year, he is also serving as a program director in the Division of Undergraduate Education for the National Science Foundation. His current interests include increasing access to mathematics through improved preparation of mathematics teachers and curriculum development. His works include a recent paper on the design of tasks that address applications to teaching secondary mathematics for use in undergraduate mathematics courses, published in the Journal of Mathematics Behavior. He was one of the lead authors of the Classroom Practices chapter of the MAA's, the Mathematical Association of America's Instructional Practices Guide. Because of his success as an educator, Dr. Alvarez carries the title of Distinguished Teaching Professor, which is granted to faculty inducted into the Academy of Distinguished Teachers at UT Arlington. He has also received the University of Texas System Regents Award for Outstanding Teaching and was recently inducted into UT Arlington's Academy of Distinguished Service Leaders. Dr. Alvarez is featured in the book, in a chapter of the book, Testimonios, Stories of Latinx and Hispanic Mathematicians. Welcome, Dr. Alvarez. That was me trying to keep it short. Welcome, Dr. Alvarez.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you, man. I can't wait. You bring such a unique perspective, such a wonderful perspective, and I can't wait for my audience to hear your perspective and your viewpoint. Let's start off by asking, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm, visiting now. Thanksgiving's upon us, so I'm visiting. I'm back in Texas for Thanksgiving, and so things are going well.
Awesome. I do hope to delve deeply into many of the issues affecting our community. But first, I want to know a little bit about you. When not engaged in work, how do you have fun, hobbies or interests, or does work consume your life?
Well, so there's a couple of things that I like to do for fun. I like to watch foreign movies. That's one of the things my wife and I enjoy doing together. I also enjoy cooking. So I like to eat, and so I learned how to cook from a very young age. So I enjoy cooking as a hobby. And then also the other thing that I do that I enjoy is genealogy work. So I like exploring my family genealogy.
What's your favorite dish?
My favorite dish. Oh, that's hard. That's a hard one. I think that well, it's not something that I make, but one of my favorite things to eat in South Texas is barbacoa. So,
I know
but,
barbacoa.
right. But I don't make that at home. I do make a really good roast, and then there's also oxtails that there's a special recipe that calls for wine and onion and leeks, and it's really a nice recipe for cooking oxtails.
Wow, as you're speaking, I can smell the aroma of barbacoa in the house. You know,
Right.
awesome. You know, I'm going to ask a little bit about your background. You know, where are you from, born and raised? And as a genealogy person, you can answer this much more accurately than most people. What is your cultural heritage?
Okay. Yeah, I was born in San Antonio originally, but I was raised all my life in Sospamco, Texas, which is a little town outside of San Antonio, about 30 miles south of San Antonio. It was originally a company town, so Sospamco stands for San Antonio Sewer Pipe and Manufacturing Company. So it actually was a town that was formed around 1900, and they made huge clay sewer pipes. And actually, in my background, that's the little church that I went to growing up. My cousin took this picture, and so I thought it was a nice. My great grandpa came from Mexico in 1890, and he came to the area, and he worked for 10 years in a brick factory that was in a little town called Alvarez, which is just about 2 miles from Sospamco. He worked there for about 10 years and saved money and bought some property. And so then I grew up in the house that when I was about 5, we moved to the house where my great grandpa had bought when he first came there. And the house is like, has some of the walls of the house are over 200 years old. So it's really interesting. It's almost like one of the missions. But we moved there when I was 5. My dad fixed up the house, and that's so I grew up in Sospamco, but I went to school in Floresville, because Sospamco didn't really have my mother grew up there also, but at the time when she was a kid, they actually had a school. But then right when I was going to go to first grade, they consolidated schools, and so I went to high school. I went to school in Floresville, which is a town nearby.
Okay, wow.
Yeah. Oh, and so my cultural background, of course, is Mexican American. I feel most tied to my Mexican roots because that's where I grew up. I grew up, in a community 99% Hispanic. That's my mom's Mexican American. My dad's actually from Spain, and so that's an influence. But really, in the area where I grew up, my cultural background and the way that we identified was Mexican American.
So here's the real critical question: in the World Cup, are you pushing for Mexico?
Yeah, we push for both. So whatever country will get up there, we're okay. We're okay. Yeah.
That's the real test. You know what I'm saying? See where your allegiance truly lies.
Right.
When did you realize that you had a talent for mathematics?
Well, I always liked math, so I remember, way back to first grade. So I don't know. It was something that I really liked. I had passion for, and I thought, I think there's a story in the Testimonios that I remember when I was in 5th grade. My teacher, we were learning different bases, right? And so she gave us all this homework, and I completed it all, and I really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed learning about different bases, and and those were the things. That was kind of when I had thought that maybe I wanted to do math, and or before that, probably I was thinking I wanted to be an artist. And but I I kind of had that experience, and then later on in high school, I did number sense. So people from Texas know about number sense and the UIL and all that kind of stuff, and so I did those kinds of things. But we also had a local. I guess the Alamo District Council of Teachers of Mathematics, when I was in high school, had a local math contest that they had every year. And I was able to place in that. And that also encouraged me a lot, kind of in a small town, you kind of don't really know how to tell where you fit, right, in the big scheme of things, right? And so that was helpful to kind of see that I loved math and I liked working at it. I enjoyed it. My teachers, were at least I was talking about my Algebra 1 teacher who I really loved, Miss Escamilla, and she helped me prepare for the contest and do more than what was being taught in school, so that I could compete. So those were those are kind of the mathematical formation, and of course I always loved it. And I did number sense in junior high and high school, and at some point I favored other things and didn't continue with the number sense probably after my junior year. But
Hey, I'm a
that's
number
kind of
one coach. Just so you know.
right. I saw that in your thing in your when I was researching who you were and things like that, and so that was nice to
So Miss
see.
Escamilla had a good role in your Algebra 1.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
yeah, and it was interesting. I ran into her the other day. Well, about 6 months ago, I ran into her at the courthouse at the little town where I grew up because I had to go back there to take care of some business. And so it was really nice to see her again. So she's still there. She taught school for many years, and I always am very thankful to her for all the stuff that she did for me. And so
Awesome.
so it was very nice to see her.
In reading your chapter, which is a fascinating chapter, you do mention how your family's experience and some of your experience, you were exposed to some systematic racism there. Would you like to share any of those experiences?
Yeah. I think so. There are we all. I think someone might say, well, oh well, you were successful. You ended up being valedictorian of your class, or you ended up doing well in school. But that didn't shield me from the fact that there were other things as I grew up, right? So there's these parallel tracks, right? So one could look at one thing versus the other. But there were, some there was racism in our school, and there were these unwritten rules about how you should act or who gets rewarded for what. And so I was aware of that from a very young age because my mother actually taught school in Floresville, or she moved there from Suspampo to Floresville to teach when I was in elementary school, and I was aware of the fact that that Hispanics were underrepresented in the top groups, so back then they ability grouped, and that there were people who would who favored certain groups over another, right? So for instance, in ability grouping and things like that certain children would get placed in the high groups even if they didn't deserve to be there, right? So they were but based on their socioeconomic status or their race, right? So they were placed into groups that were higher than they should have been. So that was, I one of the things that I felt like was as I think back, about what I had to see. One of the things that was most disturbing to me as I grew up, right? Because I think I ended up having the kind of the emotional fortitude to make it through some of the things. People said, "Oh, well, he can't be that smart because he's Mexican," or they can't, he's from Suspamco. I mean, everybody's poor in Suspamco, so nobody, you can't. There's no way that he could, achieve this or that, right? But it's still, but for me, I just kept my focus on what I wanted to do and what I liked, and but then I felt very sad when I saw other Hispanic students that were my contemporaries in my grade who I felt were really smart just kind of fall by the wayside because either they didn't have the right advocates or because of family issues family situations that ended up taking them a different direction. But I think it's also, but I think it was just not being encouraged. Right. So, I mean, I was lucky. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a teacher. And so they helped, it's like, okay, well, there were certain things that I was aware of because my parents were teachers, right? But then I could see my friends or people that I was going to school with that didn't have that same benefit necessarily, and so therefore, when you're inadvertently, and so sometimes you don't recognize the racism because you're not looking for it, or you don't realize that you don't realize it, right? So. I know my mom used to get upset sometimes when people said, "Oh, well, I've never been discriminated against," and it's like, well, it's hard for you to know, right? And also, if you're, it's like if you're unaware, right, that these things exist, right? And I think that the awareness is important. And I'm like, there's a lot of good people out there, and like I talk about that in the chapter. My mom, when she was going through school. This was back in the days, and maybe if you're back in the days when there were still signs that said Mexicans and dogs have to are not allowed in restaurants and things like that, or in swimming pools, or even at the movie theaters that they had to sit in. They had to go to the balcony. They couldn't sit on the bottom on the bottom floor of the movie theater, and so she had experiences in school that always stuck with me, right? That she took algebra 1 in high school. She was the only Mexican American in her classroom and was the only person who didn't get a book, right? Wow. So how's that equitable, right? But then she had good people, like I mentioned, her teacher who allowed her to live with her so that she wouldn't have to. Her mom couldn't afford. My grandmother couldn't afford to send her to pay for her to go to school, to the ride that they needed to pay for her to go to Floresville because it was 10 miles away, and there was no bus, right? So she needed to pay somebody to take her to school. And then when I was in school, things weren't as overt, but I think I was conscious of it. I also felt that I had a responsibility to do, to achieve, to make things better for other people, and that's kind of always been my desire to help give back somehow. So, yeah. So
I was going to say, it's easy to point at the overt racism that your mother experienced, for example, but I'm glad you made a point to point out the positive people existed too. People who really cared, so that's awesome. And sometimes the racism that's more not on the surface is more lethal, like that of lowered expectations,
Right. So then the expectation that you're not going to achieve as much as someone else, and I talked about my sister, but I have two sisters, one older than me, one younger than me, and how the counselor at her school, at the school, always routinely advised Hispanic girls to become secretaries, right? Rather than if they wanted to become a teacher, which my sister wanted to become, or some other thing, it was, oh no, you need to become a secretary. And not that there's anything wrong with being a secretary, right? But I mean, there's value in all work, right? But also to pigeonhole certain groups in one place was not right. My younger sister, when she was in high school, I remember her teacher, her math teacher, actually, she actually had the same math teacher that I had, not Miss Escamilla, the later one, and so she had the highest grade in pre-calculus or whatever it was with one of the math courses, but he gave the award to a boy. And like at the end of the year, and my dad was like, well, I don't understand. She had the highest grade. He's like, oh, well, he was more interested than she is. So, well, is that, it's, you can't say that necessarily, right, that was sexist or racist, right? But it's very suspicious if this person has the highest grade, and then you give the recognition to someone else, right, the second place. But I think that, but I like to emphasize that there are good people, right? And then there are a lot of people, there are also people who will drag you down if you're not careful, but you got to know who you are, and you got to know and there's some ways to kind of block out the noise, right, so that you can move forward.
Awesome. So where did you go to college and graduate school and the degrees earned?
Okay, so I went to East Texas State University, which is in East Texas in Commerce, and it's a small regional university. The person who had been valedictorian the year before, she should have been valedictorian the year before I went to, a grade above me. She went there, and so I figured, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to apply there. And my parents, I think for them, even though they both were teachers, they kind of didn't really see any difference in what university you went to. It's like, you just got to go to college, right? And so my dad was just like, we just can't afford to pay for it. And so I got a presidential scholarship to go to East Texas State, and I graduated from there in 3 years. Because I got enough credits from my high school AP credit. We didn't have AP, but like CLEP and scores and all kinds of stuff. So I was able to graduate from there in 6 semesters. So I didn't take any summer school, and I finished there in 6 semesters. I majored in math. I had thought about majoring in music also, because I really enjoyed playing the trumpet in high school. But I ended up, and I played in the marching band my freshman year at college. But then I decided that I liked math more than I liked other things. And I wanted to become a high school teacher. So that was my goal. I was going to teach high school math and physics. I also double majored in physics. But at some point I was enjoying the math so much that I thought, well, I want to continue studying math. So I want to get a PhD, right? And so then I went to UT Austin. I got a PhD in mathematics. My dissertation was in percolation theory. So I did some fractal geometry and probability theory, and combined some of these ideas to look at what we call a porous medium, and decide based on the structure whether or not, say, if you had an oil spill, right, whether or not the oil would get from the surface level down to the water table, right? So that could be an example of a percolation problem. And so I studied that. I had and so I got my PhD, but I was always more interested in how students learn, and in helping and in helping other students, especially students from underrepresented backgrounds, to achieve, right, to move forward. And so I got lucky that I was then connected to the Emerging Scholars Program at UT Austin, and did a lot of work for them. So
as a math teacher, high school, for 24 years, I'm definitely interested in pursuing that aspect of your job. But before I do that, were there any key figures along that path that you'd like to make a shout out to?
I think, so of course I've already talked about my high school math teacher, right, Miss Escamilla. And then as an undergraduate, I had Dr. Stuart Anderson was a math professor at East Texas State, who, when he knew I wanted to go to graduate school, and I was president of the math club and all kinds of stuff like that. So he knew I wanted to go to grad school. He was like, well, you really need these courses to go to grad school. And there wasn't enough enrollment to make, say, our topology class. And so he taught just based on it from his own goodness of his heart, right? Because he didn't get paid for it, right? He taught me and another student topology for the whole semester. He met with us like it was a regular class. We got class credit. And he did that just because he was like, you need this course before you go to grad school. And he was a really influential undergraduate mentor. Dr. Anderson, Dr. Stuart Anderson, yeah. And he's retired now. He recently retired, but he was a great mentor as an undergrad. I remember I wanted to do an honors thesis in math, but at the time, and it's still hard in pure math, I think, to do an undergraduate honors thesis, but he was like, he wasn't sure what he would have me do, right? So then I decided I would try to do one in physics, and I did not like it. I was doing signal processing, and I just found it not interesting for me. And so I thought, okay, well, I can just graduate already and go to grad school. And so that's what I did. But but then always Dr. Anderson later, and I say this in the Testimonios chapter, he always said later, he goes, I think I was one of the first students that ever approached him about an honors thesis, right? So you know how we grow in our careers, right? And so he says, oh, I wish that I had, like, I always regret not having, that I wasn't, that he wasn't sure at the time, or not experienced enough at the time, and maybe that's too strong of a word, experience, but to say, oh, well, here's a project you can work on, right, at an undergraduate level, because in mathematics everything builds. So you're going to do a thesis and try to create something new. It's really you have to finesse that for undergraduates, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So anyway, but he was great. And then for grad school, my advisor, Dr. Bill Beckner, a lot of people thought he was really, really, really tough professor. But he was instrumental for me in getting my PhD, partly because he welcomed me. Like I was studying for preliminary exams. So when you're getting your PhD, you have to pass these exams in particular areas of mathematics. And so he was the chair of the committee for one of the exams I was studying for. And so I went in to ask him a question I was looking at old tests, and I went in to ask him a question, and he was like, oh, well, do you have this resource? And I said, no, actually, because I can't get it out of the library, and they couldn't afford it as a student. And I said, well, it's checked out indefinitely from the library. I can get it. So he gave me the book, and he had it in his shelf, and he pulls it out and he goes, okay. He goes, I'll lend you the book. He goes, as long as you don't bend the pages. He goes, that's my pet peeve. And I'm like, sure, I'll take care of it. And so just from him doing that, it was such a kind gesture. And then, of course, I liked the subject area, so that's how he became my advisor. And then the other big influence with Uri Treisman, who was the person who created the Emerging Scholars Programs. And so Treisman came to UT while I was in grad school, and he was pretty influential in terms of my development as a math educator. I absolutely loved the program that he designed, and really believed in it. It's a program that was intensive, and it was aimed at increasing access for Hispanic and African American, but students historically underrepresented in STEM. And also we targeted white students from rural areas, because a lot of times they have the same kinds of adaptation problems, or transition issues that possibly affect also Hispanic students and African American students.
Wow. So your work is to improve my teaching, possibly. How do we improve teaching in our high schools? And is this the key to increasing the numbers of underrepresented minorities in STEM fields?
Well, I think it's a start, right? So yes, I think that for teachers, they do need support. They need to have opportunities for professional development. They need opportunities to reflect on their teaching, right? Because as we teach mathematics and we think about conceptual learning of the concepts, that's something that's a craft that you build over time. So if you are given the opportunity to work with other teachers, an opportunity to think about it, that's important. Opportunity to go to professional development, that's important. All of those things that would help you build your craft, but also build and then of course there's the knowledge of students and the knowledge of the environment that one is teaching in. But I think if you don't have the knowledge, if you don't have the training, then making students feel good, right, is not enough, right? You got to actually teach them something, right? There has to be something content based that needs to be there. I think what was the other question you asked me?
Is that the key to increasing The numbers of underrepresented minorities in STEM?
I don't think there's one key. I think there's a combination, right? So one is teacher preparation. You know, the other is making sure that the school environments, the structures are put in place so that that it has the synergy with the teaching of the teachers, right? The teachers feel supported. The other is making parents aware of what students need to do. So, you know, you might hear someone at middle school say, "Oh, I want my middle schooler to be an engineer one day," and then they let them choose not to take, you know, the track to get the calculus in high school. Well, it might be the parent just didn't know that they needed that, right? So, parent education, parent communication is really important. And you know, how do we also build structures so that students feel supported, right? So I think it's not just one key, it's a combination of things that's going to help increase that representation. But certainly if teacher preparation or teacher knowledge is missing, then that's an important key, that's an important factor, right? That would be a detriment. And you see that in some of the studies that come out, that that you see that schools that are struggling have the teachers that are the least prepared, right? And so those are things that we need to be aware of.
You
So
know, but also there's some confounding factors. Possibly, sometimes those schools have rough areas. Better teachers don't want to teach in the rougher areas, and you know we're so close to controversy. I can go off script, ask you about the STAR exam, ask you about starter schools. There's a lot of controversy if we want it.
right. I mean, there are lots of ways that you know. Uh, uh, you know, it's a complex problem. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to solve it, right? That we have to find ways to do better by our students and to do better by our teachers, right? Because like you said, I mean, if there's no incentive to go to a place where it might be more challenging because of the environment, right? Then you know, how can we fix that? You know, so that's beyond, you know, the things that I do, right? I'm focused on you know, working on creating the best kinds of materials, creating the best kinds of courses and things like that that teachers can engage in, right? But they also need to they also need support in their environment.
What a meaningful job that you do. What a meaningful goal. That's awesome. That's really awesome. You know. So, what is your prognosis for the future? How do things look? What do you think? As far as underrepresented minorities entering STEM fields, higher education?
Things are improving, but we're not there. And so a lot more work needs to be done. So I think that there are lots of efforts to improve access and to improve education, but we're not there yet. You know, there's still a difference, right, or gap between, you know, the bachelor degree attainment in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, which we call STEM. So there's still a gap there between students from the majority versus, say, Hispanic students and African American students. You know, and part of that is our K-12 schools, right? You can't make up if you've been in a situation where you haven't gotten the right K-12 exposure, right? Then that compounds to undergraduate. But that's not all of it. That's not the only thing that could be that are the issues, right? Because there's lots of research on, you know, what are the obstacles for students not attaining their STEM degree, and one of them, you know, they're not encouraged, right? You're not encouraged, right? There's also you know, the school environment, the things that you do once you get to college, right? If you need to get connected and get into academic social groups that are based on your interests in your academics. And there are lots of different things. Again, the complex factors, right, that
Yes.
contribute to that degree attainment. But there are still differences, and we're trying to close those differences. So we still have work to do.
Complex, man. Complex. So I want you to offer some advice. Can you give some advice for any students that are watching or parents that are watching? What would you advise them? What kind of advice would you give them?
And so students, you mean at the high school level, at the college level?
Probably a young, probably like 11th or 12th grader on the verge of college. What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, the first thing I would say is if you're in high school, take 4 years of mathematics, right? Having that gap in your math background, so you might get, even if you get up to calculus in your junior year and you leave out math in your senior year, that comes back to haunt you in college, because you got to take math in college, especially if you're going to go into STEM. Take 4 years of math. Find ways to get enriched, especially if you're thinking about majoring in STEM, right? Get involved in the math club. Find other ways to enrich your mathematics background that will allow you to do more problem solving. And, because you can't learn everything from the textbook or from your teacher, right? So there's also that part of your independent learning that you should work on developing. So think about then, as a student, I always tell my students, think about what your passions are. So even if they're not math, right, but think about what your passion is and follow your passion and follow the things that you like to do. For the parents, I would say, if you can give your students some guidance, right, if your child wants to go into STEM, right, into a science, technology, engineering, or mathematics degree program, then they really do need to be taking high levels of mathematics and science when they're in high school, so that they're the best prepared. That doesn't mean that they won't be able to do it if they don't do that, but it's going to be really, really difficult. So if you can give your student, your child support, right, to be able to have the time to do that, and I know that's not always possible, but if you can structure your life so that you can give them the time to put in the work into their studies, that will pay off in the long run. Trying to help create that environment, create those opportunities for your child, I think will be important.
Awesome. All right, so the future. Where will the future lead you in terms of research, outreach, personally? What does the future have in store for Dr. James Alvarez?
For me, I've been doing really interesting, interesting to me, right? So my research right now is looking at how we can take the undergraduate degree in mathematics. So if you want to become a math teacher, you get a degree in math, right? If you want to be a secondary math teacher, you get a degree in math. If you want to go on to graduate school in mathematics, you get a degree in math. If you want to do lots of different things, you can get a degree in math. But my interest, right, of course, is in how do we provide experiences for people to become secondary teachers, but know the mathematics they're going to teach deeply, right? So a big project that I've been working on for the last couple of years is to think about ways that we can put scenarios into the regular math major, right, that have people think about how you would communicate mathematics as a teacher, and connecting the advanced mathematics that you're learning to what you might have to teach in Algebra 1, say. So, but the idea is that we're putting these kinds of experiences in lots of different math classes, not just math classes that are aimed at a teacher audience or future teacher audience. And so this is something that we're really excited about, and hoping that that this will be something. We're in the middle of doing the research, and we found very, very positive results, and we're hoping that we will give people. We're creating materials and creating this body of knowledge so that more people can do this in their courses, and then hopefully, of course, the byproduct is that we then have really strong teachers that come out who are teaching mathematics, but then also see, okay, and you probably know this because you take advanced courses of mathematics in college, right? And then you're thinking, okay, well, how do I connect, or how was this advanced knowledge that I learned? Because I know a whole bunch more than what I'm teaching, right? In terms of the technicality and the theorems and the knowledge that you have. But how do I make that useful for what I'm teaching? And so that connection is a really important connection. So we're very hopeful. One of my research areas is problem solving. So I really also very much am a proponent, right, of focusing on the problem solving process, and getting back to the conceptual learning as students learn all levels of mathematics.
So how would a math teacher like myself get access to your final product? Will it be through an MAA publication? Will it be through a research journal? Will it be through PD opportunities? How would a guy like me get access to your work?
Well, the initial work that we've done, we're working right now on an MAA publication through the Mathematical Association of America, and so we've created nine lessons that can be placed into 4 different courses at the undergraduate level, and as a prototype, as a way to think about how we would do this and make it a larger effort, right? So we actually have a manuscript that's being evaluated by the MAA right now, and so that would be a way to eventually, right? We also have some of the prototypes available that I could send you a link to look at them, and where they're immediately useful though, right, is for faculty who are teaching these undergraduate classes, so that they can take a lesson and put it in their undergraduate class, and it fits the scope of the course. But then also the teacher, the future teacher who's in the course, can see that there's applications. A lot of times in courses we have application. We'll teach in mathematics, we'll teach a physics application, and we'll teach an application in biology or in chemistry to see how the mathematics is used, right? Well, what we're creating are these teaching applications. So now here is how the mathematics that you're learning is used to teach a particular concept in high school. So
awesome stuff. Dr. James Alvarez, any parting words or final thoughts as we conclude this interview?
Well, I'd like to say to the students out there that there are so many different things that you could do with mathematics, and I'm lucky that I like doing things for people. I also like the mathematics, and I enjoy teaching. And so I brought all that together to do the kinds of things that I do in my career, but that there are many options there in math for you to follow, if that's something you like, right? And if that's something that you feel passionate about, and that it's just important that once you get to college, that you get connected, that you become involved, get involved, go to your professors' classes, ask questions. It's really important that that you reach out, and that and you'll be welcomed. That's I'm a big proponent, and I tell this to all my students: you got to follow your passion. If if you're passionate about it, keep that as your focus, and keep that as the thing that helps you get over your fear of, say, going to the professor to ask a question, or to reach out and to become connected on campus is really important, to get connected and to feel part of the university, part of your major, and forming that community, right? Because community is important to us, right? Forming that community and being part of it is really important. So I would encourage students to do that, and and I think if we can take care of other things, right? So of course there's and I'm not to stretch this on, but there are also real issues, right, about financial aid and all those kinds of things. But if we can take care of those, right, take care of the financial aid, take care of those kinds of issues, then the next step is make sure that when you get to college, you get connected, you ask questions, you become involved. So.
Awesome. Great advice, Dr. James Alvarez. I do want to say, a very heartfelt thank you. I'm very appreciative that you came onto my channel and shared your very wonderful perspective. You got a friend in Houston, and you know what we have in common? I like food too. In particular, I like barbacoa. Barbacoa, man. You ever find yourself in these parts, we'll go get some barbacoa if you'd like to, man.
I'll look you up. That's right.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you, man.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you for all you're doing, too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Farewell. Wow, what a fascinating discussion with Dr. James Alvarez of the University of Texas at Arlington. Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. I really appreciate what a wonderful insight you gave my audience. All right, guys, let me take a quick moment and ask that if you enjoy this content, that you please hit the subscription button and the notification bell, that you leave a comment below, and that you smash that like button. I got plenty of wonderful and beautiful things in store for this channel. Help me spread this beauty and this joy to as many people as possible. Thank you very much. My name is Saul Cantu, and this is Texas Math Mundo. Farewell.